One of the greatest traits a video game can have is a smooth and gradual difficulty progression so that the gamer learns the limits of their own abilities and in some cases what the game will let you get away with. Some of the greatest games of all time are as such due to how well they ease the player into the meat of the action, and then some games really don't. There comes times when a game is out for your head on a silver platter. While the idea may be to have an even difficulty curve that helps you adapt as the game gets harder, steeper difficulty curves or difficulty spikes throw this concept back in your face and fling you straight into the deep end without a word of warning. Trust me, you'll know when you find one of these when you suddenly start dying multiple times over. The rules for this list are very simple, even though I swear I say that every time. One game per franchise, no fan-made games or game modes, and it's of course all my own opinion. With something as subjective as difficulty, we're bound to come to some disagreement here guys, so just go with it. Also, take note that just because a level is difficult, it doesn't automatically make it an example of a difficulty spike. If you have a hard level, in a hard game, then the shock value is nowhere near as strong. But anyway, I'm rambling, let's go. Oh Pokemon Gold, how I love you so. This is the game guys, this is the game that basically dominated my childhood. I'd spend many evenings wrapped around my Game Boy completely engrossed with the enviable world of training your Pokemans up. It was a beautiful experience, and what better way to ruin such a magical moment than a giant roadblock called Whitney. Now let me get one thing straight right away. Whitney, the third gym leader in the second generation of Pokemon, is perfectly manageable if you know she's coming up, when you can prepare for it in advance. But because this countdown's all about the difficulty thrust before a new player, that doesn't mean a damn thing. When you're first working your way through the world of Johto, smashing up all before you, Whitney stands as a massive reality check. Whitney was the first ever normal type Pokemon gym leader, and there's a couple of things you need to know about normal Pokemon. While they don't have any real damage resistances to them, they often have gigantic move pools and access to some widespread typing and strategies. In other words, they're tricky sons of bitches, and you really need to have some sort of idea of what you're going to do if you come up against a beefy normal Pokemon. Like Miltank for example. Whitney's Miltank is the definition of brutal. If you consider that the last gym leader you faced was a guy who specialised in bug Pokemon and looked distinctly, not male, confronting a Pokemon that acts as a literal tank to physical damage is quite the step up. Oh, sure, Whitney's also got a Clefairy, but who cares about that? The Miltank is the infamous one, the Pokemon that sits there soaking up damage, building up rollout, and doing ridiculous amounts of damage to you. This may well be the first gym leader you have to grind levels for in Gen 2, and as a result, is one hell of a difficulty spike. What do you get when you mix a circus with a butcher's shop? Lion burgers and a really annoying Psychonauts level. I might be stretching the idea of a difficulty curve by putting the last level in the game on this list, but my reason is very simple. Psychonauts is not a hard game by any means, but the Meat Circus ramps up the difficulty by such a huge margin that it comes as quite a big shock to the system. The main chunk of the difficulty comes in the form of a very annoying escort mission involving this sack of shit, who just loves bunnies.
Oh, I got you, Mr. Bunny!
Oh yeah, and his voice literally could not be more grating. But that doesn't matter. What does matter is that you've got to keep him safe from weird meat monsters while he wanders around looking for bunnies to save. I don't know. The level design here requires you to reach platforms with such a fine margin between success and failure, let alone with little Ollie getting his ass handed to him by a chunk of meat. But that's okay, because up next we've got the Carpool Tunnel of Love, which is about as inappropriate a name as physically possible. There's no love here, just a set of rails you gotta grind on with gaps that can only be overcome with inch-perfect jumping and a bit of luck. Well, at least we don't have to listen to nails on a chalkboard anymore.
You gotta help me protect the bunny!
Oh god, he's back! But that's okay, because now we've got a painfully easy boss fight to do. And another boss straight after? Oh no, wait, I don't have to climb this. Nope, fuck it, we're done here. I ain't doing any more stupid ass climbing. Next segment, please. Do you want to know what my favourite thing about Sonic is? Could it be the rings? Or Eggman's crazy mechs? Or how about the Werehog stages in Sonic Unleashed? I'm sure you know it's the mind-bending speed that defines the series. But you know what slows all of this down? Water physics. Maybe you're surprised that there's not so many water levels on this list, but the dramatic changes in gameplay are never felt harder than in Sonic games. Sonic games are known and kind of defined for their ridiculous speed ever since the first game on the Sega Genesis, and it only took them 4 levels to abandon Sonic the Hedgehog's main selling point, with the Labyrinth Zone. Good job, Sega, good job. This place reminds me a lot of Death Chamber from Sonic Adventure 2, but of course, for all that area's failings, it didn't actually have any water in it. If regular Sonic levels are trial by speed, Labyrinth Zone is trial by puzzles, water, and game-breaking slowdown. You might think that this stuff you're wading through is water, but the game makes it seem like you're swimming through thick, gooey jelly. And I don't even think jelly can be classified as gooey. I've heard people criticise some Sonic games and levels for being just a little bit too linear, kind of a hold one button and watch the fireworks. Amazing! To that I say, yeah, I kind of see where you're coming from. But this is not a viable alternative. Why go super fast through pretty levels when you can move at a snail's pace and do some stupid switch thing? Fuck it, I'm going back to Sonic Unleashed, I need my speed fix. Difficulty in Mario games is like a switch, and not like one of those fucking stupid dimmer switch things. They very rarely have a difficulty curve per se, more like a dead flat line of easy levels or occasionally back to back ball busting levels of video game torture. Because Super Mario Bros. 2 was too difficult for the American market. But there does exist one example where the game decides that your arse needs a good kicking, and it's to be found in a Super Mario Galaxy game. What makes this more interesting is that the Super Mario Galaxy games in general are stupidly easy, and have the tendency to respect your abilities just a wee bit too much. But that's okay, the trial galaxies from Super Mario Galaxy disagree entirely. Now of course, these levels aren't horrendously tricky or something that you're going to spend the rest of the day trying to complete, but when you compare and contrast what Super Mario Galaxy offered in general to what these levels give you, it's a giant leap up to a completely different difficulty level. These trial galaxies throw you into 3 levels that use mechanics seen in earlier levels. You've got the ball rolling thing, the bubble blowing thing, and the Goopa Bloopa Surfing Safari thing with the manta ray and the thing. And these 3 levels are on the same sort of track, except they're... oh fucking hell. Again, they're not so bad, but they're certainly a couple of steps up. You might argue that the perfect run from Super Mario Galaxy 2 might be more deserving of a place on here, and yeah, you could be right there. But for me, by the time I got to the end of Super Mario Galaxy 2, with 361 stars under my belt from both games, there wasn't a lot in that level that gave me trouble. The trial galaxies come at a time when you might be good at the core gameplay mechanics that are so important in Super Mario Galaxy. But then these levels use mechanics that you've only ever used once each before. It's a bit like learning how to introduce yourself in a language, and then being asked to lead a judicial inquiry in the same language. That's probably a good analogy. Oh, Rusty Bucket Bay, why are you always the massive bug on the pristine windshield of Banjo-Kazooie? In a game full of greatest evers, Rusty Bucket Bay still stands as one hell of a hurdle for you to overcome. I might be stretching what might be considered a difficulty curve, as this area does come kinda late in the game, but if you try and relate it to other locations, this place is just horrible. The problem with Rusty Bucket Bay is, surprise surprise, the goddamn water. This time, however, the water isn't a problem because it slows down the gameplay. Oh no, that'll be kind of tolerable. The problems come about because it's actually oily water that drains your air meter when you're just swimming on top of it or anywhere near it. This makes the water more of a hazard than it normally would be, and it helps make the next bit even more fun. You see, with levels like this, there's always one room, one little place that might as well be the concentration of all things bad within the level. And hell, Rusty Bucket Bay takes the fucking cake. In order to 100% the area and get one particularly hard to reach jiggy, you've got to navigate your way through a room with moving gears and axles and the stupid oily water waiting for you at the bottom. You've got to activate 3 separate switches to slow down propellers at the bottom of the ship so you can swim in there and take the jiggy, which makes it sound so much easier than it actually is. Not only are you up against a strict time limit, but one wrong step, one fuck up, and it's over. Or you could get caught in the propeller blades and get insta-killed. How can a game that is so happy and so whimsical harbour such a hateful and unforgiving area? Can we talk about GoldenEye again? I want to talk about GoldenEye again. I miss talking about that game. Sometime back on the N64, gamers were treated to two incredible FPSs. There was Perfect Dark, and 3 years earlier, there was the glorious GoldenEye 007. The game's a bit dated nowadays, but back then in the glorious era of nostalgia, it was something real special. It was addictive, it was adrenaline pumping, and most of all, it respected what you as a gamer were capable of. Oh, you know that's bullshit, right? Aztec may be a secret level stuck on the end, but the gap in difficulty between this level and the rest of the game is huge. But why would this be so tricky? It's just an FPS game. FPS games are only for casual gamers and people who spend their time rubbing Call of Duty all over themselves, right? Fuck no, what do you know about GoldenEye, son? I hate this place, I really do. This level doesn't even think about taking prisoners, it's out for your blood, served up as a fancy cocktail. Enemies in GoldenEye were fairly easy throughout most of the game, and if you were on your game, not much trouble in any way. Aztec decides to throw this into an office shredder and makes the enemies disgustingly powerful to the point where just a couple of clean hits will kill you outright. Yeah, the guards dotted around the Aztec complex have laser weapons that will kill you in a couple of hits. We abandoned any traces of sense long back down the road, guys. But how can it possibly get worse than devastatingly strong normal enemies? Well, your objective in this mission is only made viable by killing Jaws, the guy with the really excessive braces. The guy has 2 big assault rifles and takes so many bullets to the head that it borders on embarrassing. He's the classic high HP boss fight, but he happens to have enough firepower to give you a fuck ton of hassle. So, what's your reward for beating such a stupid boss fight? Maybe the game just rolls over and submits to your godly gaming skills. Haha, you're kidding, right? Killing Jaws sets off an alarm that alerts all the guards to your current location, so all the overpowered bad guys immediately rush you and kick your ass. Die here and you go all the way back to the very start of the mission. You know what I'd rather do than play through the Aztec complex? I don't know, stick sharp things in my eyes, attempt to perform brain surgery on a loved one. They'd probably be less stressful, you know? This is the hardest level on this list without a doubt, a level that I still haven't completed to this day. In fact, the only reason why this isn't cemented at number 1 is because it's stuck on right at the end of the game as an extra mission, so you'd kind of expect it to be fairly challenging. But this is not what normal people think challenging means. Rayman Origins is an incredible game. With full-on 4-player action leaping through brilliantly designed levels, it very quickly becomes a fast and frenetic experience without affecting the gameplay in a negative way. Occasionally, a level will throw up a chase sequence. You know, those levels where you can't really stop and admire the scenery because something is coming after you. But dotted throughout the game are levels that fit the scenario. They ask you to chase something. And they're absolutely ridiculous. These chess chases appear once in every world, and each and every time you dare to venture into one, you'll probably have your ass handed to you on a plate, with a side salad. These levels are technically optional, but they're not tacked on at the end like the Aztec. They're constantly there, taunting you to give them a try. In Rayman Origins, you have infinite lives, but as a trade-off, you die in one hit. When I say die, I actually mean turn into a weird bubble guy that can be popped in multiplayer and used to bring you back to life. But let's just say you haven't got any friends and that you have to do these levels on your own. They can't be that bad, can they? While these levels may be an ever-present part of Rayman Origins, they kind of maintain the steep difficulty curve throughout. Imagine if all the other levels follow one curve, and that the chess chases are potentially the same curve, but starting at a much higher difficulty. Look, I even drew a graph if that doesn't make any sense to you. Just make sure you play Rayman Origins with friends so that the experience isn't as trying. You know, I miss F-Zero. Maybe it wasn't the most forgiving game series, but the adrenaline rush you get from racing around at stupid speeds is something that isn't matched by many other games or genres. Even so, F-Zero GX wasn't that difficult a game despite how ridiculously fast-paced the action was. In a way, it almost kind of respected you and just how skilled you were at the game. There were plenty of difficult moments, but not many that weren't your fault for not achieving pinpoint perfection. Until you reach Chapter 6 of the game's story mode. Black Shadow, the big purple devil horned guy right here, has strapped a bomb to your Falcon Flyer, and you've got to drive really fucking fast so that this speed sensitive bomb doesn't explode. If you've seen the movie Speed, this will make a lot of sense to you, but at no point in that movie did the bus have to go through roads like this. So sure, the route's a little bit twisty and turny, but with the addition of slow moving cars and dirt traps as obstacles, the level stops being very difficult and starts veering towards utter bullshit. You end up either getting knocked around so much that you dip just under 700 kph, which by the way is all it takes to lose this mission, or getting knocked around to such an extent that you trash your flyer before you even get close to finishing the mission. F-Zero may have a reputation for being difficult, but no, not like this. Can I just confess something? A sadistic, slightly disturbed side of me kinda likes quite a lot about Battletoads. That sounds so weird. Battletoads was a game made during a time where game developers didn't mind being massive dicks. There was no such thing as user-friendly or even a super guide. It was more of a here's the game, thanks for your cash, see you next time. But I kinda like that. It's almost a little bit refreshing having a game that so consistently kicks you in the balls. You could almost call it a love-hate relationship, as opposed to a love, oh god, leave me alone! Most games of this era respected what you as a gamer were capable of, but that branch of homicidal developers at Rareware decided that Battletoads didn't have to be like this. Now, sure, sorry to spoil things for you guys, but Battletoads is really fucking difficult, like as hard as Sonic 06 is glitchy. But despite this, the first couple of levels are relatively challenging, an abrupt change to pace to most gamers, but far from impossible. With a bit of practice and total disregard of anything outside of Battletoads, these levels were achievable. Your reward for beating these brutal levels, I wouldn't really call it a reward. You thought those first couple of levels were bad? Oh, you know very little, my friend. Depending on your own skill at games, you'll probably come to a screeching halt at level 3, the infamously fucking infamous Turbo Tunnels. If the first two levels were a bit dickish, Turbo Tunnels are fucking insane. Maybe you can deal with the first two levels, maybe they're within what might be even considered a comfort zone in a game like Battletoads. But Turbo Tunnels are something else. Somewhere within the stupid amount of memorization you have to do, or failing that, reactions that put 100-meter sprinters to shame, the level consists of your Battletoad working his way through a ridiculous obstacle course on his hoverbike thing. The obstacles put in your way get harder and more unforgiving as you progress through the level, to the point where the game asks you to be unbelievably precise in order to progress. Yeah, it might not be the most difficult level in the game, but this is the level that told people that Battletoads wasn't gonna fuck about. Allow me to tell you a little story. Our tale takes us back to an era of promise, an era untouched by formulas or templates. A small company by the name of Nintendo peeked its head above the parapet and proclaimed that it was the saviour of the failing video game industry. Their offerings unto the gaming world were very well received, praised as paragons of their kind. It seemed that the future of video games had been saved and promised a rosy future. Nintendo continued to offer further games to us mere mortals, one of the most notable being a sequel to their impressive new Legend of Zelda. It certainly would be very interesting to see just where they could take such a marvellous series. Oh god, what the hell is this? Nah, I'm just fucking with you. I'm not here to add another coat of Zelda 2 is so bad, I don't like it, it's so different, what is this? Zelda 2 isn't actually all that bad of a game when you think about it. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit hard in places, but the game still treats you properly. Only once does it ever offer up a challenge that smells a little too much like bullshit. The worst bit is that this one challenge just happens to be called Death Mountain. How do I explain just what Death Mountain is in this game? Maybe I should start with the most obvious bit, the fact that you can just tell by looking at an overview of the map that Death Mountain's gonna give you a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, it's a total maze, with no real way of telling where to go next. I mean, that's bad enough already, but venturing into this cave reveals just how crazy Death Mountain is. If we're still talking about learning curves and difficulty curves and that sort of thing, this isn't a curve anymore designed to ease you into the difficulties of the game. We're talking about straight lines, throwing you straight into the lion's den and expecting you to adapt to such a task, which isn't easy. Death Mountain holds some of the strongest enemies in the game, most notably the Dyras. Throughout the earlier levels in Zelda 2, you are encouraged to make good use of your shield by blocking enemy attacks until you can find an opening and counter. Dyras, in any variation, have an axe so powerful that your shield won't do shit. They'll pass straight through and take a huge chunk off your health. And then there's the other type of Dyra, the ones with the throwing axes. There's no checkpoint. Without a guide, there's no way of telling where to go with dead ends around every corner. The enemies you encounter along the way are brutally strong, and you want to know what your reward for this is? A stupid motherfucking hammer! So you're saying that these villagers aren't able to make a hammer? I had to drag my way through Death Mountain instead? What kind of trade-off is that? Why do I have to go through something like this just after the first dungeon in the game? Who looked at this and said it was a good idea? This has been rabbidluigi, and I'll concede that Zelda 2 is much better than I often say it is, but I dare anyone to try and defend Death Mountain. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Son of a bitch, Paul, why didn't you just go home?